Hey, help me out this morning with a little bit of feedback from you guys. How many of you, you have a routine that on Sunday afternoons you'd like to take a nap? Anybody a nap on Sunday afternoon person? I am as well. I was not early on. I didn't like doing that early on, but boy, the older I've gotten, the more I want and crave that Sunday afternoon nap. A few weeks ago, we came to church. I was preaching that morning. We came to church with our car loaded because we were driving about 500 miles to go up to Myrtle Beach and visit family up in Myrtle Beach after church was over. And we were pretty excited. Anytime you get to go to the beach, I get pretty excited. And so the challenge is when we leave after church, I'm accustomed to a nap. So either I sleep while I drive or somebody else is going to be driving while I sleep. Well, on that particular Sunday, I had gone to bed early, and I'm an early riser, and so I got up. I'm ready to go. I preached that morning. And just so you know, at the end of every Sunday, I'm pretty drained. I give everything I've got. I know many of you do. And so I feel a little bit drained after church on Sunday, and so naps are always a good thing. Matter of fact, if you invite me out for lunch after church or you ever have lunch with me, you will see I will start to just kind of zone out. I'm like not even present. You could be talking to me. I might even respond. I don't even know what I said. I don't even remember the luncheon afterwards. So that's how I function. That's how I roll. Well, on this particular day, we're loaded up. We're ready to go. We're driving Darlene's car. We're headed up to Myrtle Beach, and it's about 500 miles. And you can imagine if you get out of here at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's a pretty lengthy drive. Well, we drive through the forest, we get to Jacksonville. We have like routine stops. I know where every Dunkin' Donuts is, and I know where every Starbucks is in this journey. I promise you, I can tell you where every one of them are. So we're getting through Jacksonville. We get up on I-95 North, and we're heading north. I'm feeling pretty good. We stopped enough times. I get out, I stretch my legs, I walk around a little bit. Everybody gets that picture. Darlene keeps saying, do you want me to drive? Because, see, she has night blindness, so she can't really drive at nighttime. So if she's going to drive, she has to drive during the daytime. I'm talking really fast because I got a lot I want to talk about. I want to make sure you get this. All right, so if you're going, man, he really talks fast. He's had too much caffeine today. I've had no caffeine. I'm just talking fast because I got a point to make. So we're cruising up 95, and she's like, are you sure you're okay? And I said, yeah, I'm good. We stop. We grab, something to eat. We're cruising along. I'm good. I'm good to go. Until they all go to sleep. The sun goes down. And I got tired. Man, it hit me like a ton of bricks hit me. And I am like, ugh. And I'm driving and, I feel that. And Darlene, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good to go, yeah. One of those. It was one of those drives. It was not good. And it's gotten dark, and all of the sudden, there was this bright light in the sky. Now, the only way to define this light in the sky is to show you a picture of the light that I saw. And that sign was shining so bright. I told you I was going to do a Dunkin' Donuts illustration. She walked in with 2 Dunkin' Donut drinks, and I said, I might have to grab one of those from you today. If you've been around me at all, you know I really like frozen coffees. And so I pulled off at the light, shining brightly for David, and grabbed a frozen coffee, and I was good to go. The last 100 miles, I enjoyed sipping on that frozen coffee. But it was in the midst of the darkness that a light shone brightly called Dunkin' Donuts. Now, I asked our team this morning in our team rally, and I ask you, and I ask all of you by watching on way of internet, those of you sitting in your living rooms and wherever you are, all of you in here, how many of you would agree that we live in a dark world? I mean, we live in a dark world. And this isn't doom and gloom, it's reality. We live in a dark world. I mean, Mr. Fail, you work at a middle school. You see it as much as anybody does, what the next generation is going to have to deal with. Desiree, you work in an elementary school. I mean, you see it every day. Coach, you're out on a ball field with ball players. I mean, you're seeing it every day. You're instructing kids in an elementary school or in a band program, and you're seeing, kids are growing up. This next generation is having to grow up in a world I didn't even grow up in. And pastors and preachers were talking back in my day when I was a middle school and high school kid about how dark it was. So it only makes sense that Jesus gave us some language that said, you are the light of the world, and you are to shine brightly in the midst of the darkness. Well, if you're not familiar with the fellowship, we do what I would call kind of one sermon over a number of different weeks, and today I want to talk about another character today. It's actually an Old Testament character that helps us to put some meat on the bone, if you will, to flesh this out so that we've got a clear understanding of why this is so difficult, because God gives us examples of people that shine brightly in their dark space. Now, God gives these examples along the journey, and last week I was sharing with you one of them, and early in human history, there was this guy named Abram, or Abraham, and Abraham, his name was later changed to Abraham. Abraham is somebody that God says, I want you to shine brightly. Matter of fact, last week, we actually talked about Abraham's grandson's son. His name is Joseph. And so I want to start today by giving you some biblical text to set up what we're going to talk about today. In Genesis chapter 12, the very first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 12, verse number 1, it says that the Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, your father's family, and go to a land that I will show you. I'll make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you'll be a blessing to others. Now, in these couple of verses, here's some things that are very clear. Matter of fact, if we could just leave that passage up for a second. Here's what's very clear. God speaks to Abraham very clearly. God told him, I want you to leave your family. I want you to leave your country. I want you to leave. God says, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. So God is speaking clearly. I'm going to make you famous. I'm going to make you a blessing. What's not clear and what gets a little bit foggy is some of the parts of this that we don't have clarity to. For example, okay, I'm to leave my country, I'm to leave my family, but where am I to go? That's a little bit of a detail that he doesn't have. And that can get a little unsettling. I'm not sure where to go. I just know I'm supposed to go, but where am I to go? Why am I leaving my family? Why can't my family all go with me? So there are some fuzzy details. Hey, I'm going to be a blessing to people. I'm going to be famous, you're saying, God? I'm a nobody, Abram's saying. So God gives him a little bit more clarity. He says, then the Lord said to Abram, you can be sure. Here it is. You're going to be a light. I'm giving you specific instruction. You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land where they'll be oppressed as slaves for 40 years, but I will punish the nation that enslaves them. In the end, they'll come away with great wealth. Now, last week, I set the table for this. If you missed it, you need to go back and watch it. Remember Joseph, the youngest of the boys, sold into slavery. His dad was told he was killed. He ends up being sold into slavery and then accused of rape. He's in prison for 13 years, and he finds favor with the head of Egypt, called Potiphar. He's elevated to the number 2 position, so much so that every time Joseph showed up. Now, this is a Hebrew, an Israelite eventually. They're not Israelites yet. He is somebody that comes up through the ranks of the Egyptian royal family, and he ends up with such favor that people bow down in his presence. That's a crazy story. We talked about it last week. Now, Abram is told, I'm going to make you famous. I'm going to make you the head of a great nation. You're going to have so many descendants, all these things. And Abram hears him, and so he responds in one of obedience, and he begins this adventurous journey with God, trusting God that he would do something significant. And he begins to have children. Abraham and Sarah, they had children. They had a boy by the name of Isaac. Isaac marries a girl named Sarah. They have children. One of them is Jacob. That's Joseph's dad. Jacob is the guy that Abraham's grandson, that his name is changed from Jacob to Israel. That's where we get the nation of Israel, is through his bloodline. And Jacob and his wife Rachel have a son named Joseph. And Joseph becomes this amazing leader in Egypt. Now, he is in Egypt. They've gone through a famine, and something is happening in Egypt that we need to make sure we understand. The population of this people group we refer to as Israel today, or Hebrews back then, Hebrew people. The population begins to grow. I mean, that would be a natural byproduct of what was happening. And so moms and dads are having children, and children are growing up, and they're having children because they're slaves for 400 years in Egypt. Well, the Pharaoh of Egypt becomes paranoid, and in his paranoia, he makes a land decree because he becomes frightful. He starts to catch wind, and there's a little bit of buzz running around Egypt that the Hebrew people are strong. I mean, they're working every day. They're developing some muscle. And as they grow in number, now they grow in even greater muscle. And the Pharaoh catches wind that they should fear these people. So he makes a decree. Seems a little radical to me, but I don't live in that particular era of time. But he makes a decision. I want every single child that is born that's a boy, I want him thrown into the crocodile-infested waters of the Nile. Now, could you imagine being a mom? And I have a small little baby boy. Could you imagine, as a mommy, having to toss your boy into the Nile knowing there's crocodiles? Or drowning in the Nile? And that's what went out, that all the Hebrew people that were slaves, so not only are they slaves, creating something for Egypt, building something for Egypt, creating great wealth for Egypt, but now they've been commanded to throw their baby boys into the Nile River. That's crazy, isn't it? And that's exactly what happened. So one day, there was a mom. She already had a little girl named Miriam. And Mom and Miriam decided, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I cannot play. She's just had a little boy, and she's got him in her little basket. She just can't come to grips with, I can't put my little boy in the river. So she wraps him all up, sticks him inside of a little basket. She takes the basket and she floats it out into the Nile River and praying, please, God, don't let my son die. And she and her daughter Miriam create this little way of tracking the little baby boy. And Miriam gets into the tall weeds along the Nile River and follows him as he's going down the Nile River. I mean, every bit of this is in the Bible. I'm paraphrasing it all. You can go back and read it all. It's unbelievable good. And the baby is floating down the Nile, and Mom intentionally gave the baby a little push in a direction that every Hebrew knew that at a certain time during the day, the Pharaoh, the head of Egypt's daughter, and all of her friends, her maidens, would come down into the water and they would bathe. And so there's this little cove outside of the palace. And so Miriam and her mom push this little basket towards that. And Miriam follows off in the weeds. When the Pharaoh's daughter goes out to bathe with her friends, They see the little basket floating up the Nile into their little cove, and they go get the basket. She sees the little boy inside, and she is smitten. Oh, look at this cute little boy. Man, he's beautiful. He's just a baby. I want him. I want that little boy. And everybody, oh, he's so cute. At that time, Miriam pops out from the weeds. Hey, you're going to need somebody to nurse that baby, to feed that baby. I know somebody. I know this lady back in town, and she'd be more than, I could take the baby for you and ask her. And the Pharaoh's daughter does something really crazy. She says, sure, okay, cool. I'll even pay you to do it. Now, how awesome is that? And so Miriam, the little baby's older sister, the Pharaoh's daughter doesn't know it, takes the baby back to his mom, who nurses the baby and raises this child. And she's compensated for it. Now, don't think for a moment, and Scripture doesn't define this, but don't think for a moment that the entire time that this baby's mom had him, cuddling him, laying him down at night, feeding him, wasn't pouring into him who he is. Let me tell you, little boy, you're special. I don't know what God's going to do with you, but our God, Jehovah God's got something big for you. Because all your little buddies died out there in the river, but you have been saved. And Mom is pouring into him. Exodus chapter 2 and verse number 9, when the Pharaoh's little daughter saw the baby, she said, take this baby and nurse him for me. The princess told the baby's mother, I'll pay you for your help. So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. I love that story. The baby's name, as he grows, is given a name, and his name is Moses. Moses in Hebrew means drawn out of something. And in Egyptian, his name meant son. The son that has been drawn out from something. Moses grows up for 40 years in royalty. He's a part of the royal family for 40 years. Somewhere around being 40 years old, Moses is out. He understands he is a Hebrew. He understands that his people are the slaves. By this point, we're going to guess that he probably even knows a little bit of his own story. One day he's out walking around when he sees one of his kindred brothers, one of the Hebrew kids, men, being mistreated. And he's mistreated by an Egyptian guard, and Moses doesn't take kindly to it. And he snaps. He goes over and kills the Egyptian guard with everybody watching. I mean, they all know he's royalty. You can't just come out and physically manhandle somebody and kill an Egyptian guard. And man, there was an uproar. Word got back to the palace. Pharaoh hears about it. Everybody's disappointed. Everybody is like, come on, Moses, what are you doing? And Moses, out of fear, leaves Egypt. He runs to the desert. He lands in a place called Midian, a town called Midian on the backside of a mountain. And it's there that Moses decides at 40 years of age to start a whole new life. They don't know him as the prince from the palace. They only know him as a nomad, a drifter from the desert. And Moses shows up in Midian. He meets a little girl. They get married. He's excited. They start having kids, and they buy a minivan, and they get Netflix and all that stuff. Moses is establishing a whole new life. And for the next 40 years, Moses serves the people of Midian, you ready? As a shepherd. 40 years as the prince in the palace, and now 40 years as a shepherd. taking care of his father-in-law's herd, loving life with his wife and his children. 40 years of being that guy. One day on the backside of the mountain, he shows up. And he stumbles into something that would change his life forever. It was a little bush. And the bush was on fire. But it didn't burn up. And as he looked at this bush, I don't even know how you would respond. I can only imagine how I'd be like, now that's cool. Is this like the Carbonaro effect, or what's going on here? And Moses encounters this bush. Exodus 2, verse 23 says, years had passed, the king of Egypt had died, but the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. The people that were slaves in Egypt began to cry out to God for help. And the Bible says that their cry rose up to God, and God heard their groaning. Say the word heard. God heard their groaning. They're well over 1 million people strong. Slaves to the Egyptians, creating an unbelievable empire, but they're groaning at their slavery, and God hears them. And God remembered, say remembered. God remembered his covenant promise to Abraham. A few rungs up the ladder. Hey, Abraham, I'm going to make you famous. Hey, Abraham, I'm going to make you a people. Hey, Abraham, by the way, these people that grow out of you, they're going to get enslaved for 400 years. Well, it's been some time. And the people are moaning, and God remembers the covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down. Say the word looked. God looked down on the people of Israel and knew it was time to act. So if I could, God sees them, God hears them, and God knows. God, let me just put this into perspective for you. God hears you, God sees you, and God knows you. Whatever is going on in your life today, God sees you. He hears you, and he knows you. And here's what I know about a room this size and those watching by way of internet. There are some challenges in life in this room. It could be marital challenge. It could be relationship challenge. It could be physical health challenges. It could be financial burdens. God hears you. He sees you. He knows you. And when the people of God cried out, God remembered them. He heard them. He saw them. He knew it was time to act. And I want to serve as a reminder today that whatever it is that you're going through, when you think nobody else cares, you might even share it with your pastor and walk away and go, man, he doesn't care. He didn't even hear me. Let me tell you, God hears you, and he cares. And you'd much rather have God hearing you and caring and seeing you than your pastor. Don't get me wrong. I care. But it's much better for God to care. So Moses is about 80 years old, and that's where I want to pick up the story in the next few moments. I'm going to read a lengthy passage of Scripture so that we're all on the same page. Here we go. We're going to start Exodus chapter 3 and verse number 1, and when you're home this week, I encourage you to go back and read this passage. One day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. And by the way, every verse in here, we could preach a whole sermon. When I was in seminary, I had to break down the book of Genesis verse by verse, but I also had to break down the book of Exodus verse by verse. Darlene knows, probably one of my favorite classes I've ever done was the book of Exodus. It changed my perspective on the way God functions. And as I went word by word through the book of Exodus, I learned so much it was ridiculous. And I encourage you, do an exegetical study on the book of Exodus. You'll be blown away by how good God is and how he sees and hears you. So one day when Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, who was the priest of Midian, he led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai. Now, there's a great word. You need to go back and research. What else is Sinai famous for? And I'll let you figure that one out. This is the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. So there's the bush, it's on fire, and God is in it. Now, it's not God standing in physical form in the bush. God is the bush on fire. He's the flame of the fire, okay? Which, by the way, is a great reference to the Holy Spirit of God. The flaming fire of God is the Holy Spirit. I love this. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was not engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. And when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses! Here I am, Moses replied. Don't come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your shoes, take off your sandals, for you're standing on holy ground. I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And when Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I've certainly seen, say the word seen. God sees you. I've certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I've heard, say the word heard. God hears you. So if you think God's somewhere off in the distance and he doesn't see you and hear you, I want to remind you, friend, he sees you and hears you. Sometimes it takes us crying out to him. I've heard the cries of distress because of the harsh slave drivers, and yes, I am aware. Say aware. I know, God says. I'm fully aware of what's going on. There has not been an emergency session of the Trinity over what's happening. I'm fully aware of it. So I've come down to rescue. So God has left heaven. He's shown up in the form of a bush on fire. And God shows up in this bush on fire, and he says, so I've come to rescue them, talking about the Hebrew people that are enslaved in Egypt. I've come to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and to lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey, a land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, and Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I've seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. So now go, for I'm sending you to Pharaoh. Now, can you imagine Moses processing that phrase? I don't have any desire to go back to that dude. There's got to be some remnants of people that remember me snapping that guy's neck that was a guard. I'm going to send you back to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. This was his Dunkin' Donut sign, if you will. In the midst of the darkness of Egyptian slavery, God's people didn't have a future in front of them that they could see, and all of a sudden, the sign appears. God shows up in the right time. He knows and he sees the distress of the people, and he calls out Moses to say, it's time. But Moses, verse 11, he protested to God. What are you talking about, God? In his New York accent. What are you talking about? I can't go to the Pharaoh. That's southern Midian for some of you. And Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? God, who am I to lead the people? God, did you forget what happened about 40 years ago? God, did you forget that I killed somebody? Did you forget that I was the boy that grew up in the palace? Did you forget that people there don't like me? I'm not liked. I'm not welcome back in that place. Moses takes the focus off of what God can do, and he starts thinking, what only He can do. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been there. There are times that my eyes drift from keeping them on God, and I start going, oh man, I could do it. I've got some skill. I've got some abilities and some talents. And my eyes come off of God, and all of a sudden their eyes are on David, and maybe you've sensed this same thing in your life, and man, we miss it. It's critical that our eyes stay focused on Jesus. And the first 10 verses of Exodus chapter 3 are all about what God's going to do and what God can do for 10 verses until you get to verse number 11. And Moses turns it from what God can do to what he cannot do. Did you know, and this is a simple way of illustrating this, did you know that between 2011 and 2017, more people died in the world from taking a selfie photo than from shark attacks? Now, we're going to give you an idea of why maybe some of them died. Here's a few images. Yeah, there's one. How about these two guys taking their selfie up on top? That's crazy. Woo. And maybe this is like you. God's clear of what He wants of you, but you're struggling to find the clarity because your eyes are focused on you. Five times in the next portion of this story, 5 times, Moses argues with God. I'm not good enough. I'm not bad enough. I'm not whatever enough. God, I can't do it. 5 times. So Moses protested to God. Are you kidding me? How could I possibly be the person? So God answers him. Moses, I'll be with you. Now, we're reading this in hindsight, and it sounds really lovely to go, God, and we can go, what a knucklehead Moses is. Man, God said He'll be with you. Come on, buck up, little man. This was a difficult season for Moses. And if you've ever walked in the shoes of God calling you to something extraordinary that's out of your comfort zone, you too will have some apprehension. And you'll ask some questions of God. The beauty is God sees, hears, and knows how to help you navigate. God answered Moses, Moses, I'm going to be with you. This is your sign. This is your Dunkin' Donuts in the night. This is your sign that I am the one who sent you. When you've brought the people of Egypt, the people out of Egypt, you'll worship God at this very mountain. Moses, there's coming a day you're going to lead them out of here, and you're coming back here with them to worship. Now, that gives you a clue of Mount Sinai. But Moses protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they're going to ask me, okay, well, what's His name? God, what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent you to me, has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. So this goes back and forth between God and Moses. God's laying out the playbook. God's saying, here's the sign. Here's God saying, here's what I want you to do. And Moses just continues to look at himself and go, man, I'm not good enough. I'm not sharp enough. I'm not whatever enough. I don't think, God, I'm the guy that can do it. God, in His patience, starts doing some miracles. Hey, Moses, take your staff, throw it on the ground. Turns into a snake. Well, pick it up by the tail, and it does, and it turns back into a rod. Hey, Moses, put your hand inside your coat. Now pull it out. It's full of a disease. Put your hand back, and it's healed. God says, listen, these miracles that I'm showing you, I'm telling you, man, I'm going to be with you. These are some of the things I'm going to do to the Egyptian people to prove my power and my might, and I want you to go and be my representative. I want you to be, here it is, I want you to be the light that shines brightest in the dark space of Egypt. Moses still, even after those miracles, doesn't know that he's the guy. Even though he's getting the specific game plan, you flip over to chapter 4 of Exodus, and Moses says something like this: hey, God, do you not know, God, I don't speak very good. Moses again pleaded with him, Lord, please send someone else. Anybody but me. I don't know about you, but you ever felt that way? Man, I have. God, anybody but me. Come on, God, could you send somebody else? God's calling you to maybe work with kids and serve children in our church, because at this place, what's happening behind that wall right now, I want you to know is equally as important to us as what's happening in this room right now. So if you're a mommy or a daddy of a child back there, I want you to know we have prayed and strategized and prepared so that your kids are ministered to in a powerful way today. We take it serious around here. This isn't about just a light show on Sunday mornings in this room. This is about giving those kids an unbelievable experience to come to know Christ back there. Maybe God's calling you to children's ministry. Maybe you can't figure it out, and maybe through this message you're feeling this sense of, hey, how could I serve in kids ministry? And you go, man, anybody but me. And maybe God calls you to work with students. Man, I was in with our teenagers last Wednesday night speaking. We started this new series. Unbelievable. Kelsey and David are doing such a great job. Our leaders back there doing a great job of ministering to high school and middle school students on Wednesday nights. Maybe God wants you to serve students, and you've been going, man, I don't know that there's a need, or I don't know that I'm good enough. Listen, you may not be a good fit for children or students. You need to know that. So don't just go, well, because of the message, I'm going to go serve somewhere. Man, go through a process. Where could God use you best? God's already taken Moses through a process and continues this process. Maybe God's calling you to share the gospel with a coworker, or through the drive-thru at Wendy's. God wants you to do something extraordinary with your life. And you're saying, but God, I don't know that I'm good enough. I don't know that I'm sharp enough. I don't know that I'm smart enough. I don't know that I'm educated enough. God, I don't know that I speak well enough. Here's what I would tell you. I don't want you to miss out on the greatest adventure in this lifetime, and it's the adventure of walking with God. I can just tell you from personal experience, it will be the greatest adventure you ever take. Walk with God.